Welcome to the Political Matrix News. Politics, people, local, regional, national news. Political Matrix News keeps you informed. We have the sources, we have the truth from inside the political matrix. And welcome back again. Another fun-filled and exciting episode of the Political Matrix blogcast. I am Rob Milford down in Orlando in the middle of your frame. That would be Greg Fink, who's holding down the fort in Gainesville. And Bob Price is joining us, one of the founders of Breitbart, Texas. Robert, how have you been, sir?
Well, been doing really well. We're enjoying life down here in Texas right now. We're going through a huge roller coaster with the court rulings on the on whether Texas can enforce its brand new immigration law. So that's going to be an interesting set of things for us to talk about today.
Well, that's exactly what I was calling about, because my friend who's a police officer in Houston called me late on Tuesday, not late Tuesday, 9 o'clock Tuesday night, going, hey, I can start arresting and shipping them back. We need to go to Brownsville to get some stuff anyway. And that lasted about, 2 more hours until the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said, oh, we don't care what the Supreme said. You still can't do it, Texas. What the heck? I mean, you got to have your head on a swivel.
Oh, it's for the last 10 days, it's just been on again, off again, on actually 3 weeks. It's been this way, on again, off again, on again, off again. And now we're in the off again mode while we're waiting on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to look at the merits of the case. They had oral arguments today. The state of Texas basically argued that, look, we're not creating new immigration law. We're just mirroring the federal law and making that a state law thing as well, and doing exactly the same thing that the federal government, that Joe Biden's administration is supposed to be doing.
Right.
And they're not doing that. And so Texas says we're going to have to pick up the slack because we've had about 5 million illegal aliens come into Texas over the past 3.5 years, and that's just not acceptable. That Abadi guy, the terrorist that came in the other day in El Paso, how many of those have gotten through untouched?
Exactly.
Go ahead, Greg.
I mean, I think it's totally ridiculous that the entire idea that, I mean, I'm a legal novice, I guess, at this. I'm trying to figure out what's so hard to figure out. I mean, they just want to enforce federal law. I mean, why is the Supreme Court does not have enough information to rule on this and kick it back to the Fifth Appellate Court? I have no idea why nobody has enough information. I mean, it's pretty simple.
The Supreme Court said is that the Fifth Circuit didn't rule on the merits of the case, and therefore it's too early to bring it to the Supreme Court to make a ruling on. So they sent it back to the wonderful people at the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans, who I guess they're off Mardi Gras break by now. And so they had arguments today. The Texas Attorney General's office was there making their argument. The federal government made a really odd argument. They said that basically the asking people to voluntarily remove themselves under threat of decades in prison is roughly the same thing as forcing a deportation on them. Well, the federal government's been doing that for decades. Most migrants that cross back across the border are voluntary returns, not put them in handcuffs and put them on an airplane and send them back. So again,
Randy Clark, who wrote your article, has spent more than 3 decades with the Border Patrol, I'm assuming in Texas, but the way things are going, it could be anywhere. So he absolutely is a subject matter expert. When you talk to him, do you just hear him banging his head against the wall? The last few years have been absolute catastrophe.
Doing nothing but that. Yeah. So Randy, when I first met Randy, he was the number 3 guy in the Del Rio sector, and right below the sector chief patrol agent. But he's worked the Arizona border in the Tucson sector. He's worked. He started in the Del Rio sector and worked a couple other sectors, and then came back. They were 32 years experience. He knows a lot about what's going on there and what the problems are and how you go about fixing them. He's kind of in the camp right now that this may not be constitutional, but my feeling is that because it is mirroring the federal law and not really creating any new law, that it should be okay. So we'll see how the courts rule. But I thought the Biden administration's arguments today were pretty weak.
Well,
Don't
they
worry.
they are, and Biden, of course, makes the case that I need the Republicans in Congress to do this and that so I can fix things. Except he, with the stroke of a pen and executive orders, blew off everything that Trump had done. It was Randy a big fan of the Trump wall?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The wall is the wall doesn't stop the crossings necessarily,
Yeah.
but it's a necessary tool to have there
Yeah.
because it helps the Border Patrol manage areas that are hard to get to.
Right.
And the other piece of it is it's not just a physical wall. There's a lot of electronic surveillance that goes into
Mhm.
this. And more importantly, there's all weather access roads that go along these walls that allow them to move up and down the border. I went to the border in the Tucson sector and with Sheriff Mark Daniels a few years ago, and we went along the border wall, and you could barely move through there. I mean, you're talking, terrains like this, just up and down, and just washed out gullies and all of this kind of stuff. You couldn't do it without really heavy duty gear, 4-wheel drive.
Right.
And now they come in there when they build the new walls, they level all that out, grade it out, and put in all weather roads so that the Border Patrol agents can move quickly up and down there and respond to where migrants are crossing in the few places that they can cross.
Wow. That's, one of those things that probably didn't get mentioned along the way. We're talking with Bob Price. He's the editor for Breitbart Texas, which, if you want to look at them, just go to the Breitbart website. And what did we call it? Border and terrorism? What's the
Yeah,
pancake under?
border and cartel chronicles. Our cartel chronicles section is a
Yeah.
group of really brave men and women in Mexico who write for us under pseudonyms because they would be murdered otherwise. More journalists are murdered in Mexico than any place in the world, and so they're risking their lives to bring out the truth of what's happening down there in these cartels, particularly nasty stuff. I mean, we're talking, IED explosives,
Mhm.
ISIS level terrorism, throwing dismembered bodies out into the street, dropping bombs from drones, very sophisticated stuff, heavily armored vehicles. They're virtually paramilitary forces down there, and yet we can't get the Biden administration to classify them as a foreign terrorist organization.
Well, I
Yeah,
don't
we don't
think a
want
lot
to
of
tick
people
off the
realize.
Mexicans. What are they going to do? Send more Mexicans? I mean,
Exactly.
really? Or allow
I
more
mean,
to come across? Sorry.
I,
Yeah, somebody was it Trump that a few weeks back said, we may have to take military action to take out the cartels. I was shocked.
Well, there's been actually several people that have been advocating that.
yeah.
Um, uh, Dan Crenshaw, the former Navy SEAL, who's a congressman from used to be in Ted Poe's. You remember Ted Poe?
Yeah, like
His old
northeast of
congressional
Houston.
seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fighting Second congressional district, and so yeah, he's been advocating that, and the Constitution actually gives the governor the authority to do that. Under Article 1, Section 10, I think it's paragraph 3, the governor
You look at that up.
has the legal authority to repel an invasion.
Right.
And Texas has declared this to be an invasion. So far, we haven't chosen the option of taking military action across the border, but we've certainly militarized big sections of this side of the border.
Exactly.
Um,
I mean, I had
Article
a best friend of mine
1,
was a border
Section
patrol agent.
10.
And he was a border patrol agent for 17 years, and he saw even back in the early 2000s and around 2010 and 12, they were bringing tanks all the way up to the border, and dropping people off with tanks, military tanks. I mean, it has been more or less nearly a military type invasion for well over a decade, and people don't realize how long it's been going back like that.
Yeah. And the cartels now are getting bolder and bolder under the weakness of the Biden administration. We had a shootout in Mission, Texas, down the Rio Grande Valley sector this week, where a Mission police officer was shot and seriously injured. Fortunately, the bad guy was even more seriously injured. I don't know if he survived now or not, but that's how dangerous it is. We're seeing more and more um, human smugglers who are stopped by the Texas Department of Public Safety, and they're finding weapons in these vehicles on a very disturbingly frequent basis.
Wow. All right, folks, that's Bob Price from Breitbart News. He lives in Texas. He is, well, an adopted Texan and loves Texas, and he wants everybody to know the truth. I've worked with Bob over the years, and I thought we should go directly to the horse's mouth. We're going to talk about the Mexican invasion, for lack of a better term. I'm still trying to figure out that 300-pound Costa Rican woman who says she walked 1,000 miles. If you walk 1,000 miles, you're not going to be in the 280 to 300 club. In flip-flops of all things.
Well,
there's that, Bob.
Let me tell you
Good
something
with you.
else
Great
that's
seeing
scary.
you, buddy. Best to the bride, and
All right.
we will hook you up again. We'll visit back again.